most of the stuff me and Bernie talk about this morning and every morning is depressing. Not baseball, not in New York. It's been a great summer so far. Our next guest is a guy that spent 17 years covering the New York Yankees for the New York Daily News. He's now a big star at MLB.com, but he'd admit that the best work he ever did was as my weekly Yankee reporter down at 640 Sports in Pompano Beach, Florida, many years ago. Here he is, the great baseball guy back on Bernie and Sid, Mark Feinsand. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, gentlemen. How you doing?
Good to have you, pal. Good. Congratulations. My book I just talked about coming out this summer. Yours is out, and you've written great baseball books before, Mark. This is your best work. It's entitled The Franchise, New York Yankees, A Curated History of the Bronx Bombers. I know you got Joe Torre to actually do the forward, which is really, really good. I mean, really good. And I do want to discuss one of the things you talked about in the book, and that's the core four. And you say in the book that for some reason, people always forget Bernie Williams. They don't forget Mariano Rivera. They don't forget Derek Jeter, Pettit. But for some reason, they always forget Bernie Williams. Now, me and Bernie love Bernie Williams. Why is that the case?
Well, I think it was just a case of bad timing for Bernie that the core four name was developed and sort of created in 2009 when that group of four of Posada and Jeter, Pettit, and Rivera were going for their fifth title, and those are the four guys remaining from a dynasty. Bernie had been retired for 3 years at that point, but Bernie knows that nobody's really slighting him when they leave him out of the core four conversation. As a matter of fact, he gets brought up more often when the core four conversation comes up than anybody else of why isn't he in there? So he actually looks at it as he's almost an unofficial member because, if people are bringing his name up all the time, that means he must have done something right along the way.
Mark Feinsand on the Bernie and Sid show. Maybe they should have something like the Jive 5 so they could include him.
That's good.
You could four, you just can't add somebody else. But either way, Mark Feinsand, listen, you write also about Hal Steinbrenner. How is Hal's managerial, or how is he different from his dad George? Let's put it that way.
Well, I think Hal is unapologetic in saying that he is a different person, different personality than his father was, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. George had success with those teams in the 90s and at the beginning with the Bronx Zoo, but there was a lot of bad years in between there. Let's also not forget Hal Steinbrenner is playing a completely different game than his father did in terms of the sort of spending rules that are in place and the penalties that are in place, and not to mention the fact that every other team out there also has a ton of money. So George used to be able to just flex his financial might, sort of swing that hammer, and all of a sudden he had whatever free agent he wanted. That's not how the game works now. We've seen the San Diego Padres hand out $200-300 million contracts. So having money isn't enough to be a winning organization. Hal understands that, and I think he's put a good infrastructure in place underneath him with Brian Cashman and everybody else to be successful, whether they're the top spending team or not.
Mark Feinsand, the book is The Franchise, New York Yankees, A Curated History of the Bronx Bombers. But even when George was there, he was not able to get everybody. We got Reggie. That was a big deal for the 1976 season. But, for example, he really wanted Greg Maddux, and Maddux picked the Braves over the Yankees. And then he really wanted Mike Mussina after Baltimore, and Mussina really didn't want to come here. I mean, they took him to houses out in Jersey. They wined and dined him, and eventually they did convince Mike Mussina to become a Bronx Bomber, and he had some big years here with the Yankees. But that was not an easy task to get Mussina here. What does Mike talk about as it turned out?
Yeah, I sat down with Mike in his hometown of Montoursville, Pennsylvania, for a few hours for this interview, and he was pretty candid. He admitted the idea of playing in New York was not appealing to him, but that was mainly because his experience in New York was as a visiting player staying either in Times Square or by Grand Central, and that's all he knew, and he didn't know about some of these suburbs. And the Yankees put the full-court press on him right after the World Series ended in 2000. Yep. Joe Torre called him before he even went on vacation, right after the parade, called him to say, we want you here. And that really stuck with Mussina. He said to Joe, why are you calling me? Shouldn't you be on an island somewhere? And that was how important it was. And obviously Mussina ended up coming to New York. And, he and Jason Giambi fall into that category of sort of spending their entire lengthy Yankees careers in between championship teams, right? They won in 2000, Messina gets here in 01, Giambi gets here in 02. They both leave after 08, and the Yankees win in 09. But Messina has no regrets over that. He knows how close they were, and some things fall your way, some things don't. But all of it ended up with him in the Hall of Fame.
And he did play on 2 World Series teams, albeit losing teams, 2001 to Arizona and 2003 to the Florida Marlins.
Correct, and he had some wonderful postseason moments in those years. Certainly 2003, that 3 innings of relief that he pitched in Game 7 was as important as anything else that happened in that game right up until Aaron Boone hit his home run.
Mark, are you impressed with my partner's recall capacity? I mean, he knows everything. He knows all stats, facts, obscure and famous as well.
Anyway, I need help. I call Sid.
He really is amazing. Hey, listen, Mark, let me ask you you write about Paul O'Neill as well. They're going to retire his number. I mean, the move from Cincinnati to New York was not only career-changing for him, but it was life-changing, and I believe you write about that. And, in fact, I know you do. Tell us about it, please.
Well, it's funny. O'Neill won a World Series in Cincinnati. He's a Cincinnati kid. He grew up there. This was sort of the dream, to be playing at home and knowing that, you were having this kind of success. And they traded him to the Yankees for Roberto Kelly. That trade was not popular in New York. Roberto Kelly had been an all-star. He was a younger player, looked at as, one of the future sort of, he was supposed to be one of those guys they looked at in the core that they eventually had. But they traded him for Paul O'Neill. Gene Michael saw something in him and said, look, we don't want you to be a home run hitter. We want you to be a hitter. And obviously he was. He won a batting title, had a fantastic career with the Yankees, and he became essentially a New Yorker after growing up in Ohio playing with the Reds. And like you said, they're retiring his number this year. I mean, who can forget his final game at Yankee Stadium, Game 5 of the World Series in 2001? He had the entire stadium chanting his name. And you bring that up to him now, and he still gets emotional thinking about it, because that was it was an overwhelming moment for him, and really a moment that expressed sort of what a guy who was not a homegrown guy meant to this fan base.
What a book. My God, Mark Feinsand, the franchise New York Yankees, a curated history of the Bronx Bombers, forward by Joe Torre. You have to go get this book. It just sounds amazing. By the way, a lot of these guys also didn't want to come to New York because the last thing they wanted to hear driving to the stadium in the afternoon are morons like Mike Francesa, Chris Russo, Sid Rosenberg, and Joe Boningo bashing them for having a bad night the night before. Just trust me.
I was going to step back there until you included your own name, so at least you're,
Yes, right. Let's get to this modern-day Yankee club. Mark, I'm on the way to the stadium tonight with my beautiful wife, Danielle. Yankees, 30 games over 500. They matched their streak back in 1973, winning 13 straight home games. And what we've seen out of Aaron Judge so far this year, he's on pace to have one of the greatest seasons, not just in Yankee history, but MLB history already with 25 home runs. He's got a big payday coming. How much do you think the Yankees will have to divvy up to Aaron Judge, and do you think they'll pay him before the end of the season?
They won't pay him before the end of the season because I don't think
they're going to allow this guy to go to free agency and become a Los Angeles Dodger.
I don't think they have a choice at this point. He said before the season, if it wasn't done by the season, he was going to not negotiate during the year. Now, look, they can call his agent and say, here's $400 million, and the agent would say, hey, Aaron, I think we should talk. But I don't think that's the way this is going to go down. I think he'll go to free agency knowing that the Yankees have the ability to pay him if they want to. I think he's worth more to the Yankees on a long-term deal than anybody else just because of the brand and the face of the franchise and the popularity of the fan base. You go to L.A. and you're joining a team with a bunch of other stars. You go to San Francisco and who knows what happens there. The one most interesting team to me that's going to be in this mix is the Mets, because Steve Cohen has the money to get anybody he wants, and wouldn't that be something for him to go take the Yankees' best player away from them? So that could be a really interesting sort of side story in this offseason. But Judge, I think a lot of people thought he was crazy for turning down 7 years, $213 million extension at his age, going, in his age 30 season. But it certainly seems like the bet that he placed on himself, at least through 60 games, is certainly paying off.
Mark Feinsand on the Bernie and Sid Show. Mark, you also, you write about a lot of things, but I want to ask you about a situation that occurred recently with the Yankees, and that would involve Josh Donaldson and Tim Anderson. Of course, Josh was, he was reprimanded by the league, and Aaron Boone kind of backed him up. Aaron Judge, not so much. What do you make of that? For people who don't know, he called Tim Anderson Jackie, who had referred to himself as Jackie Robinson in the past, and he was called a racist for it. And your thoughts on that?
I mean, I thought it was a misunderstanding of sorts. I know people have killed Josh Donaldson for it. I don't have a problem with people killing him for it. I think the fact that Anderson had done that interview with SI, Donaldson claims one thing, Anderson kind of claims another. This is sort of a he said thing. I think the whole thing is the fact that we're still talking about it is sort of amazing to me. But look, I think Anderson is certainly entitled to believe anything he wants. Donaldson has his story that he's swearing by and sticking to. I don't think it's ever going to be a situation where we really know the truth for sure.
Well, we are talking about it now because Donaldson just served that suspension literally 2 days ago. Mark Feinsand is here. Now, you cover all of Major League Baseball, not just the Yankees, even though this great book is about the Yanks. Had Mike Francesa on this show last Tuesday, who's one of the biggest Yankee fans ever live, and he says as great as the Yankees are playing, he thinks the more dangerous team here in New York may be the Mets. And, oh, my God, just imagine when they get back Jacob deGrom, if they do, and Max Scherzer, just how good they could be even then. What about Mike Francesa's contention? You agree?
I do agree. I actually was talking to somebody about this the other day that, everybody's getting excited about a Subway Series. This would be a very different Subway Series than the one we saw in 2000 because I think the Mets actually might be favored. Even if the Yankees wind up with a better record, you go into a short series, 7-game series where you can throw Scherzer and deGrom 4, maybe 5 times. That's, the Yankees are going to have trouble combating that in terms of the starting pitching. As great as the starting pitching has been for the Yankees, and don't get me wrong, it's been incredible. And that was my biggest question mark for this team coming into the year. Who was going to step up behind Cole? They all have. And actually, Cole, I think, has the worst ERA on the staff, amazingly. But Scherzer and deGrom are a different animal. And now, this is all under the caveat that they're healthy and pitching the way that they're, have traditionally pitched. But if they are and they do, I don't know how anybody's going to beat the Mets in a short series if those guys are at the top of their game. So it could be a pretty fascinating summer into fall in New York. We've seen the best team in the league not get to the World Series many, many times. So there's a lot of work for both teams to do before we can talk about a Subway Series. The Mets have to figure out a way for, I guess they'll have to wait till they play Atlanta to try to let Atlanta lose a game for the first time. The fact that series, that division's down to 4 games is pretty unbelievable. But it took a 14-game winning streak to get there. Atlanta's not going to win every game the rest of the year, I don't think. It's the Yankees are a really, really good team. Here's how good they are. If they play 500 ball the rest of the season, they'll have 96 wins.
Wow, the rich just keep getting richer. Hey, Mark Feinsand, that was a great job out of you. The book is a franchise, and we appreciate you appearing on the Bernie and Sid Show.
My pleasure, fellas. Anytime.
Excellent job. Thank you, Mark Feinsand there. And as Bunny just pointed out again, the book is a great little history of the Yanks, the franchise, New York Yankees, the curated history dating all the way back, and certainly those great Joe Torre teams that won 4 World Series. The Yanks, by the way, have not won a World Series since 2009. Joe Girardi just fired by the Philadelphia Phillies 2 weeks ago, the last manager to win a World Series for the Yankees, now going on 13 years. The Mets, by the way, it's been 36 years. 1-800-848-WABC, 1-800-848-9222. Lots more to come, including the great Bill O'Reilly, the very entertaining Fox News host Pete Hegseth, and all the big news of the day. We're Bernie and Sid back on a Thursday right after this.